Hi, this is Mark Sarazano from the International Piano Technician School, and this is the first book I ever read on piano servicing, and in this video I'd like to share with you some of the modifications I've made to these steps to make them easier to understand. In the book, Mr. Reblitz has a section on vertical regulation, and in that section he has a list of all the steps that you need to take to regulate the piano. Step 1, position the let-off rail. So what is the let-off rail? Here's a picture of a let-off rail with some broken screws. Here's a picture of the let-off rail inside the piano with the screwdriver on top showing how you turn the screws to raise and lower the let-off buttons. And here's a picture of the screw that attaches the let-off rail to the action by way of the let-off bracket. Here's a picture of the let-off button that would be attached to the let-off rail. And this is how the let-off button works. When you press the key down, the whip-in goes up. The whip-in is below the jack here, so the whip-in's down here. The key goes down, pushes up on the whip-in, the jack goes up, and then the jack toe gets closer to the let-off button. Eventually it will engage with the let-off button, and then the toe will stop going up, causing the jack itself to rotate, and that is called let-off. In the Reblitz book, there's a paragraph for each step of the regulation procedure. For the step that says position the let-off rail, we have this description. Check the position of the let-off rail before reinstalling the action in the piano. Adjust it in or out if necessary so the jack toes are centered on the regulation button cushions when the jacks bump into them, and swing out from under the hammers. Tighten the screws. As we saw, the let-off rail is attached to the action through these brackets, and the screws should be tight. And the let-off rail should not have moved since it was manufactured, and those buttons underneath should be centered on the jack toes. In rare instances they might not be if the screws were loose and the let-off rail had moved a little bit. That can happen, but it's rare. Or maybe in the factory it was regulated improperly. But again, rare. So my modification clarifies this point by saying check the let-off rail in case it is loose, make sure the screws are tight. Reposition if necessary. The let-off rail should be fine, but the let-off rail screws may have worked themselves loose. This small addition to the description helps us to understand that some things are a lot more important than others, and some things probably require attention. Positioning the let-off rail probably doesn't. The next step, straighten the damper lift rod. Okay, what's the damper lift rod? Here's a picture of the damper lift rod at the back of the action. When you press on the sustain pedal, the right pedal, a rod will push up on this part of the damper lift rod, causing the damper lift rod to swing out. Here's a side view of the damper lift rod. The damper lift rod is down. The dowel will go underneath and push up on this part, and it will rotate around these hinges like this. You press up, and the bottom of the damper will be pushed out, causing the top of the damper to move away from the strings. Here's the damper lift rod with the bent pin here. Here it is in the action, and here is a damper lift rod with a broken pin. This is rare, but it does happen. Here is the broken pin inside the action. So here is a top view of the hammers and the dampers, and then a top view of the main action rail with the damper lift rod with its bent pin. And the question is, what happens when one of these pins breaks? Like this. Now when you press on the pedal, it will try to rotate the damper lift rod so that it swings out, but because there's no pin there on the left, that part of the rod will swing out a lot more. And the dampers you notice here are moving much farther than the other ones. When that happens, you know you have a broken damper pin. So when we look back at this step, it says straighten the damper lift rod. This is a picture of a damper lift rod next to a screwdriver. Look at the thickness of the damper lift rod here. There's virtually no way that this rod would be bent. The procedure description says turn the action around and check the damper lift rod to see that both ends swing out simultaneously when the dowel lifts it. If not, look for bent hangers and straighten them if necessary. At this point with the action on the bench, don't worry about whether all the dampers appear to lift simultaneously. This is confusing because we saw here that they do not lift simultaneously, and this is a serious problem, and I would not say don't worry about it. I would definitely be worrying about it. So understanding how this damper pin can affect how the dampers work can help you know what's wrong when you see, for example, the dampers not lifting simultaneously. What he's talking about there is if individual dampers seem to lift earlier than others. A more helpful modification might be to say something like this: straighten the damper lift rod. This rod is virtually never bent. In rare cases, one of the small L-shaped hinge rods might be bent or broken. Check how the dampers are lifting when you press the sustain pedal. If one of the hinge pins is broken, only one side of the dampers will lift, while the other side will not. Click the link on this page to sign up for more regulation modifications for the Reblitz, upright, and grand regulation steps.